go in front of me. I would like to just welcome you to the Clean Energy Forum here. A couple quick things to go through beforehand. First off, if you're hip and cool, then you'll have your cell phones out throughout this debate, I'm sure. Please make sure to mute those. Also, if you're on Twitter, we are using hashtags MPLS Mayor and MPLS Energy Forum. Basically, I'll keep this simple and brief. This event would not be possible without our partners, the organizations you saw in the hallway, and others that help make the information and the resources available for us to tackle issues around energy and be aware and more, just basically more aware as citizens in Minneapolis. So I wanted to quickly say thank you to them. MN350, MPERG, Environment Minnesota, the Will Steger Foundation, Fresh Energy, Cool Planet, Windustry, Minneapolis Energy Options, the League of Women Voters Minnesota, and the Citizens Climate Lobby all were integral, along with MRES and MNCEA, in pulling this together tonight. And speaking of MNCEA, I want to give it over to Lynn here to tackle the next little bit.
Thanks, Eric. My name is Lynn Hinkle. I'm Policy Director for the Minnesota Solar Energy Industry Association. MNCEA represents approximately 50 organizations throughout the entire solar value chain in Minnesota, and we want to thank each of you for coming this evening. But beyond that, let's celebrate at least three things. Number one, we were able to achieve a significant clean energy jobs bill this last session. It has significant components, fundamental, and that's right. That is really the result of people in this room and others who lobbied hard. We're at the Rotunda when the governor spoke in support of our legislation. We haven't had the ceremonial signing yet, but it's a big deal, not just for jobs and clean energy in this state, but what it's going to signal for the development of solar throughout this country. The second thing to celebrate is the presentation from our president this afternoon. I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to listen to the leadership that's being provided at that level. And the third thing for us to celebrate is the kind of leadership that we're going to see and hear about this evening in the development of a clean energy economy, the kind of family-sustaining jobs, the development of energy efficiency and renewable energy for the city of Minneapolis. Thanks again. I'm looking forward to what our candidates have to say about setting the stage for a new process of clean energy in Minneapolis. Or perhaps it's not new, the extension and the further development. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dustin.
Thank you again, everybody, for coming out tonight. My name is Dustin Dennison. I am a proud and privileged board member of the Minnesota Renewable Energy Society and a board member of MNCEA, the Minnesota Solar Energy Industry Association. I want to be very clear on our disclaimer tonight that tonight's event is not an endorsement by any of the hosts or co-hosts. I'd also like to make clear why this event is important. All of these candidates, whether or not they will continue to play a public role in our lives and in our state, either as elected officials or in the private sector, our opportunity is to hear from them, to hear from our civic leaders on the issues that are important to us. And I'm glad that we can bring to the stage these candidates and talk about the issues that are important to all of us and put environment and energy on a stage that's worthy of bringing an audience together and the issues that are important to all of us about our future. As a housekeeping note, each campaign is responsible for picking up your literature. We would gladly take volunteers at the end of the event, so please, as we've covered in our rules, no stickers on any items. Leaflets, please make sure they get picked up. I also want to thank the organizers of this event, not only the co-hosts, the hosts, but also the individuals, staff from MPERG, the shadow group from MRES, Jan, Doug, Peter. There was a lot of individuals involved in this group, Lynn, John, for helping put this event together. Thank you. And I'm also very honored to have the privilege to introduce the winner of 3 national Emmys, a 2-time winner of the George Foster Peabody Award, the broadcast equivalent of the Pulitzer Prize, and in the last 15 years has dedicated his extensive investigative talents to the field of environmental journalism. Also a board member of the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. It is my honor, and I'm proud to announce our moderator tonight, Don Shelby.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. This is the right place to be. On this particular occasion, as you heard, the President of the United States has made an astounding announcement today of policy from the White House directly related to the issues that we're going to be discussing today in general, and specifically, we'll be talking with these candidates about Minneapolis, already a leader in many of these areas. Now, I want to tell you a couple of things. One, this discussion can continue when we conclude. We have to vacate this building by 9 o'clock sharp, so we'll try to end at 8:30. You'll have some time to meet and greet with candidates, look at some of the displays and some of the exhibits, but we have to be out of this building at 9 o'clock. We also will continue the discussion if you care to join us at the Lowbrow, which is at, I think, just up Nicollet, 46 or 43rd. It's just up the way a little bit. And if you want to take part in that, you can. We're going to start now officially, and what I'm going to do is dispense with honorifics and with titles. So there are a lot of council members, former commissioners. That gets to be a little difficult to keep track of. So tonight, the honorific is candidate. They're going to be spoken of as candidate. X candidate, Y candidate, Z. So we're going to get to it now. And the first thing I'm going to do is sit down. The second thing I'm going to do is ask a question that I think should be asked of every candidate for office in the United States of America. This is not a question that requires a 2-minute response. It requires just a show of hands. In the last 100 years, there has been, by consensus and by all models and all science, a rise in temperature in the planet Earth. How many of the candidates assembled here tonight believe that that rise in temperature is due to human inducement through the use of fossil fuels and land management? May I see a show of hands of those who believe that is true? Everyone here. Thank you very much. That's not a litmus test, but it should be asked of every candidate for every office in the land because so many people have denied the science, and by denying the science, we can get nowhere. These candidates have been in debate before. This is not their first rodeo, so what we're going to do is ask a question of the first candidate, and then we will proceed down the line and ask the next question of the next candidate, and then they will all have 2 minutes with which to respond with possible follow-ups. I think that everyone understands this. Everyone has been prepared with the questions ahead of time. They know what the questions are. And so we're going to begin with the subject of solar candidates. Minneapolis residents have shown a strong interest in solar energy, and this year the state legislature has put forth policies to grow the industry in the state. What part do you see the Minneapolis mayor playing in developing the opportunities of community solar gardens, solar on public and private buildings, and the economic benefits of solar? And please be specific in your answer. Candidate Samuel.
Thank you, and thank you for entertaining me and us tonight here at Washburn. It's appropriate that we're in a school on this issue. I think the mayor can do a lot. First of all, let me say thanks to the legislature for all the work it's done for advancing the state in this important issue with policies like the solar program and net metering and the solar garden program. And so I think that we now have to respond. And I think a mayor can play an important part in that. I think we can advocate for the use of solar energy in city buildings and public buildings. Thanks to Mark for raising that issue. And especially in schools, it could be a great educational tool. That's why I think being here is so ironic and important. Young people can get educated on the issue. And then I think the mayor can promote and champion by holding press conferences and demonstrations, and we can put incentives in utility bills for the community to participate in things like solar gardens, which will allow them to gain benefit of having a solar panel in a cooperative kind of garden if their houses do not afford the opportunity. And so I think, I would like to be the mayor that champions the use of solar, and especially in communities where people actually could do with the economic opportunity of reducing their energy costs.
Thank you very much. Candidate Winton, same question.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. I'm Cam Winton. Let me come to the question in about 10 seconds, but first, let me do a few things. First, let me give you a disclaimer. I work for Duke Energy. One of my customers is Xcel Energy, and I think it's important in the course of this race that candidates be candid about the professional and business involvements they've had. I think some other folks on the stage have not always been as candid, and so I want to put that right up front. I work for Duke Energy. One of my customers is Xcel Energy. And with my colleagues, I built a wind turbine maintenance company. I do this for a living. I do renewable energy for a living. I didn't start Outland Energy Services, but I was proud to join with the founder and the rest of my 119 colleagues to build that company to provide services for wind turbines across the country and increasingly around the world. We sold our company in the fourth quarter of 2012 to Duke Energy in a way that preserved the jobs of all 120 employees and enabled everybody to share in the benefits of the sale. And to this day, my day job is senior counsel at Duke Energy, where I provide legal support services for wind farms and increasingly solar farms across the country. So, to your question, I think it was Al Gore who said, there's no magic bullet as we deal with climate change, but there is magic buckshot, meaning we have to throw every possible solution we can at the problem of climate change. And the reason I got into wind in the first place was because I wanted to do my part to address this pressing issue of our time. And solar, yes, is one of the important ways that we can address climate change. Solar, wind, biomass, hydro. I'm really intrigued about tidal power. It's probably 15 years out. But as we do all these things, we have to remember that we have to work within certain frameworks. We have to deal with reality. And for reasons I can get into in a moment, solar in downtown Minneapolis is not going to be one of my priorities. Don mentioned one of the other candidates' proposal. The numbers there simply did not add up. I would direct everyone to the Star Tribune's coverage of one of my opponent's proposals. The numbers just don't add up. It was a supporter of one of my opponents in the crowd at his kickoff event or his press conference who flat out said, these numbers don't add up. So we need to make sure the numbers add up as we do this.
Thank you very much. Candidate Cherryhomes.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here this evening. One of the things that I would like to do first is to build on our status as a solar American city, and I'd like to compliment the council members who are with me here this evening for the work that they've done in getting Minneapolis recognized as a solar American city. You know, the fact of the matter is that we should not be disagreeing about these initiatives. We should all be finding ways to work together on this, and whoever is elected mayor of Minneapolis needs to pledge to work with each and every one of us as we make our city more sustainable. And to do that, I want to work on the Solar Gardens initiative. I've already talked with 2 private property owners in North Minneapolis who are very poised to do this. I'm doing that now because I believe that we have a huge opportunity with the Solar Gardens. I also would like to provide zoning and density incentives to businesses and residents for installing solar systems on their properties. And I think the city needs to lead by example. We should set an annual solar energy production goal, and it should be measured. We should do it with city installations on city properties, and it should be underwritten by the payback. But the other really difficult thing that I want to focus on and that I think we need to do is make solar real for and available to lower income communities and citizens in our city, like our senior citizens, who may not be invested or engaged in it right now. In the community that I live in and used to represent on the council, if you were to talk to most of my neighbors, they wouldn't know what this was all about. It's perceived that solar and opportunities of solar are the purview of people that have more opportunity. We have to figure out how do we make it real for lower income communities, for lower income homeowners. And I think the state of California has some great examples of tax incentives and subsidies and programs that really bring the solar opportunities to other people in our city who might not normally be able to participate in that. And I think that that's the leadership that I would like to help provide as mayor.
Thank you very much. Candidate Andrew.
Thank you. I've devoted a really big part of my life to environmentalism, all the way back to my college years as a co-founder and the first president of MPIRG and the Minnesota chair of Earth Week at the University of Minnesota, later as the staff person to the Senate Environment Committee, and then as an elected official, elected 5 times. I created the recycling program that all of you participate in today. I was a leader on getting the county to look at light rail transit as a way to mitigate the impacts of vehicle-caused air pollution contributing to climate change. I was the creator of the Midtown Greenway, which was a strategy to encourage more hiking and biking and transit in our city. I've devoted much of my life to this work. As a candidate for mayor, I am the only candidate who has actually said something about the environment. I proposed putting solar panels on all city buildings, park buildings, and school buildings because it is time for the city to set an example and do what we need to do to get the public, to get private industry, to get the utilities, to get our citizens and residents on board knowing that they can have confidence that the city is going to play a leadership role. We can do so. This is a really exciting time to be an environmentalist, a really exciting time. Cost of solar is getting more viable, making it more viable for programs. We have concepts like solar gardens being articulated in our communities. Think about this. A shared array in a neighborhood with grid-connected subscribers to that. It's a brilliant idea. It is going to drive massive amounts of public awareness and support for these programs as time goes. And the economics for solar have gotten much, much better. It is an exciting time. Part of the reason I am running for mayor is because I am the only person up here with any pedigree on environmental leadership whatsoever. People who are on the council, with the exception of Cam, I apologize to Cam, and Cam has been very much of a leader on wind energy and ought to get credit for that. But I want to make sure that we all understand that it is our shared responsibility as policymakers and as citizens to advance our environmental goals. I have proven that I can do that. I've proven that I will do that. And I have an active proposal sitting on the table to deliver several megawatts of solar power over the first 3 years of my administration.
Thank you, Candidate Andrew. Candidate Hodges, same question.
Thank you very much.
I think there are 4 key things that the mayor needs to do in regard to solar energy. First is to have a long-term vision and a long-term plan. I am proud of the work I've done on the City Council on our long-term vision and plan. As a matter of fact, on Friday, I will be voting on the most recent version of this climate action plan. I'm proud of our LEED certification requirement on city buildings as we do projects, the solar array on the convention center. So first, we have to have that long-term vision. Second, we need to push as hard as we can with Excel to meet our city's 10% renewable goal, which means getting as much local renewable as possible, which will rely on solar. We have to push to use local manufacturers and labor as well. Third, we need to lead with efficiency to make sure that we are getting the maximum effective use of the investments that we make in solar. We want to make sure we have buildings that are at maximum efficiency. Any plan we have has to start with incorporating efficiency into the mix. And finally, we have to incorporate it into the city's budget. But for that, any plan needs sound numbers, and that's my arena. I am chair of the budget committee. It's a great goal to have solar on public buildings. But the real goal is to have substance on that, make sure the numbers are good. I'm not going to put a plan out there for you where the numbers don't add up. We need to make sure we have realistic cost estimates for how much it costs to put smaller solar arrays on buildings. And we need to be sure that the public buildings that we're talking about can actually take that level of solar on them. Many are in shade, many can't take a solar array. 160 buildings is a lot. There's far fewer than that can actually take solar. But we won't know the actual numbers until the state tells us later in 2014 about what the Minnesota benefits number, what the VOA number is. But when it comes to that, then we can put a solid plan together for putting solar, using solar throughout the city. But we start with a vision.
Thank you, Candidate Hodges. Candidate Cohen.
The greatest weapon that a mayor has in advancing solar is you. Your knowledge, your dedication, your determination, your willingness to fight for what is right in this problem, in this situation. And it all begins with education, and knowledge, and an understanding what the issues are. It should no longer be necessary, but Don did point out how necessary it was to remind people that this is not a nefarious plot of some kind by mad left-wing science. This is a serious problem as a result of the burning of fossil fuels, which are finite and will not always be there, but will keep increasing in price as long as the amount is being manipulated by outside forces. And we have to have policies, strong policies that deal with this. It begins with strong, dedicated people, and it begins with people educated as to what the issues are. These are the most important assets a mayor can have. As for specific policies, the policies that advance solar are being dealt with every day at a national and even at a statewide level. I bring to you news that a great victory was won in Iowa just the other day by a solar third-party supplier that was able to achieve the right to operate in Dubuque and actually solar panels on the top of the Dubuque City Hall in the face of a so-called exclusivity contract with Alliant down in Iowa, and the judge ruled in favor of the solar supplier. These kinds of legal victories are the result of strong, dedicated people working to accomplish these goals. And I, if I'm fortunate enough to be mayor, will work with these people to do this.
Thank you, Candidate Cohen. We'll begin this next series of questions about climate with Candidate Winton. The recently proposed Minneapolis City Council Climate Action Plan includes programs for energy savings and generation in commercial and the industrial sector that should result in both job creation and greenhouse gas reduction. As mayor, how would you utilize programs like Property Assessed Clean Energy, the PACE program, Guaranteed Energy Savings Programs, GESP, or other solutions to attract private capital to develop a nation-leading program to achieve the City Council's goals? Candidate Winton.
As mayor, I would use each and every one of those programs to achieve the city's goals as set forth in the Climate Action Plan. Quick show of hands, folks in the room here, who worked on the Climate Action Plan? I see Ross Abbey over there. Who else? Anybody else? What a great job. It's fantastic. Bravo. Thank you. As a resident of Minneapolis, put aside the fact I'm a candidate, thank you. It's just a great, great product, and I encourage everyone to check out the Climate Action Plan that some really hardworking volunteers put together. It lays out a big vision in terms of reduction of carbon and increase in the use of transit, and I share all of those goals. To the particular methods you mentioned, if you have a pen, write this down. It's the future. PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy, PACE finance. Anyone see the article in the New York Times the other day about the use of PACE over in Edina on the roof of I believe it was a gas station or an auto body shop? And the gist of it is, the city, in our case, of course, it'd be Minneapolis. If Edina can do it, we can do it. Minneapolis would issue bonds. Money flows in. Minneapolis hands the proceeds to the owner of a property. The property owner takes those proceeds and puts in renewable energy generation facilities, in this particular case, solar panels. Over time, the property owner saves money, and the bonds are paid back via property taxes on that property. It's a lien. It sits with that property. And what's great about it is it provides a guaranteed stream. The city can issue debt at a preferred rate, and business owners don't have to put up the capital in the first place to put solar panels on their roofs. This is a great thing that I'd like to see used more broadly. Folks who follow this closely may know that on the residential side, there's been a bit of an issue because government mortgage backers, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, don't like to back mortgages when there's a lien on the mortgage. And so that's a little bit of a wrinkle that some states, like Minnesota, have done a pretty good job of getting around. But it's smooth sailing on the commercial side to use PACE to put solar panels on roofs. And as mayor, I'd advocate to fix the wrinkles on the residential side and expand the use of it on the commercial side. And when I have more time, I'll talk about the use of the guaranteed energy savings contracts as well. Thrilling stuff.
Candidate Cherryhomes.
Thank you. Candidate Winton has just given us a great example and a great understanding of what the PACE program is. And it's indeed a good program, but I would just venture to guess that a lot of what works in Edina isn't going to work in a lot of parts of our city without some additional assistance and some additional support from the city. We do not have businesses that can necessarily invest in things as easily. We don't have people that can invest. We need to figure out how to make that work for all of the residents of our city, because it can't just be the purview of one group. I think there are some things that we can do to really increase sustainability, and I have some fresh real-time experience with one of them because my husband chairs the Public Housing Authority Board of Commissioners, and they recently implemented a 4-year program to do an energy audit and to upgrade management systems at public housing. The MPHA used the energy savings and the revenue stream to pay for the improvements and was able to guarantee a return from the vendors who did the improvements. The city has done only small contracts like this, and as mayor, I would advance that we do larger contracts like this. I think the Public Housing Authority, one of the highest performing public housing authorities in our country, has taken exceptional leadership to show how they can do that in their buildings that house lower income people who face greater cost when energy is expensive. The other thing that we can do is we can use this as an opportunity to create jobs. And I think that the Oakland Green Jobs Corps is a perfect example of that. It's an opportunity to create green jobs with people in our city that then can serve businesses throughout our communities. What happens in this initiative is it provides college credit training for the green construction and for solar construction, and then these folks are guaranteed a job at the end of the day, and they're able to work in their field, and they're able to work for businesses that are looking for workers who are certified and trained in green opportunities. So I think there are a couple things that we can do. It's about leadership. It's about stepping up and providing the leadership from the public sector, like the Public Housing Authority did. And it's about connecting with our nonprofit organizations and people that are working to create jobs and turning the paradigm a bit. So we're talking about creating green jobs, and we're providing real career paths for people in a green economy.
Thank you, Candidate Cherryhomes. Candidate Andrew, same question.
Great thoughts. And I think what we're seeing here is the beginning of energy being generated by candidates who see the public demand to do better, to do more, to have higher performance on sustainability and particularly on renewables and strategies to mitigate climate impacts. The PACE program is a great program. It's a great opportunity, but it's a local government finance program, and it's a property assessed program. And as Jackie points out, there's a lot of organizations in Minneapolis that will not be able to do that. I think PACE is actually operating in Edina right now, in no other city in Hennepin County. The legislation does extend the life of that program from 10 years to 20 years. It's going to make it a little bit more viable, but it's a great program for us to work with, but we have to let 100 flowers bloom and 100 schools of thought contend, if I can quote Mao, sorry. And it's a very important thing that we have multiple strategies. I want to tell you just a little bit about my company. I went into the private sector 14 years ago. For the past 8 years, I've operated Greenmark. Green for the environment, Mark because it's my name. And we work on large-scale environmental installations to improve the environmental performance of buildings. And then we build marketing platforms to do environmental storytelling so the public sees the value of doing these things. Our little company has been fairly successful. And one of the reasons we are is we're coming up with creative ways to finance projects. I am working with a client right now, a fairly large entity that's trying to do solar. We're trying to do the first major solar project in this community, and they can't make it pencil because of the current economics. And the way we're going to do that is we are going to allow it to monetize by developing marketing programs and making the host vendors of those programs participate in the storytelling opportunities, thus generating additional incremental revenue for those projects and allowing them to move forward. It's another creative innovation that we need to look at. The future is in devising these creative schemes to allow us to plow through the economic disadvantages to bring these projects to reality.
Thank you, Candidate Andrew. Candidate Hodges.
Thank you. As mayor, I will champion PACE and make sure that we can move forward swiftly. I was proud to work on it this session with the League of Minnesota Cities, getting some provisions that in our legislative agenda at the League that we could move forward at the state, and had some success with that and feel very good about that. And as Mark said, the recent legislation does extend 10 years to 20 years. That, in addition to bundling efficiency with the solar, makes it much more possible and more feasible for folks to use PACE. It also means that people can save more than they're paying in interest over time because they have a longer time and because the efficiency reduces the cost. So it's a great option. We also enabled the third-party PACE so that someone else besides the city could pay the cost of that program. GESP, also a great tool. Right now it's enabled to do on state buildings. In other words, the energy company or whoever it is comes in to public buildings, they make the energy improvements, they get for a specified period of time, they get the profit off of that, but then long term those buildings retain that energy efficiency. Right now it's for state buildings. I think we should advocate to have that on city buildings. In addition, right now there's a limit on the number of buildings that one investor can put solar panels on, 25 roof limit for an investor. And we should consider, XL doesn't like it. XL doesn't like it if we do more than that, and we should consider pushing to do more than that anyway. If you read the Climate Action Plan, there are a whole host of other strategies in here to increase the private investment, restructuring the mechanical permit fees at the city level, for example. I also want to applaud the folks who worked on this Climate Action Plan. It is going to be a great thing for me and a great tool for me when I am mayor, just as it will be in the next 6 months as I am council member. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Candidate Hodges. Candidate Cohen.
Well, I see a lot of heads nodding yes in the audience, and that tells me what you all believe, and I think that we all believe up here that this is a good and effective program. We ought to get behind it. I really can't add anything to the expertise that I've heard here today. I guess I'd say if I were mayor, I'd hire all these people to run the program for me. They did a terrific job on this question. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Samuel?
Yes, also I support just about all the ideas here. I think we've gone over it pretty intensely. I can tell you that there are other things we can do locally, like I'd like to take some credit for 100 green homes being built in North Minneapolis, funded by city resources, and going to be able to attract young urban folks who are interested in saving energy and who have the kind of forward-thinking and forward-looking energy that communities like North Minneapolis needs. And just yesterday I fired off an email to Habitat for Humanity talking about that initiative, the 100 green homes, and asking them to join with the city investigating the costs and seeing if they might be able to implement something similar in all their homes, where a Habitat home is a green home. And now you have energy savings for the folks who really need it most, and closing what has been alluded to here, what I could call the green gap, where low-income people live in older homes that are not energy efficient, and landlords pass on the costs of utilities to the tenant, spending as little as possible on insulating homes. And so the people who need energy savings most, both in cost and in comfort, are the ones who get it least. And I think that we have an opportunity as the leaders of the city to begin to close that gap. So I would like to make areas of the city that have lost housing or have opportunities because of older housing to make sure that all of that construction and all of that rehab is done in a green way, and that the city finds ways to encourage, support, and fund those projects.
Thank you very much. The next question will go to Jackie Cherryhomes. Personal transportation is one of the largest contributors to carbon emissions, given the projected population growth at the city and the metropolitan level. How will you shape transportation options and land use patterns to support population growth while still reducing carbon emissions?
People will get out of their cars and will take other forms of transportation when transit is affordable, accessible, safe, and when we have dense housing around those transportation nodes, when neighborhoods are safe, and when there are services in those communities that people want. That's the reality. So we need to have a vigorous, robust, multimodal transit system, and that includes everything from bikes to trains. But while we're working on building trains and building light rail and building streetcars, while we're doing that, we need to also work to ensure that our buses today are safe, accessible, and people are able to get to where they need to go on our buses. Because for a lot of people, that's reality right now, and we need to make those buses safer and more accessible. We need to have density along our transit lines. We need to not be afraid of density, and I am a candidate who will support density in our neighborhoods and on transit lines, so we have more people who are living close to our urban core so they can get to and from without having to drive a car. I will confess, I drive too much. And I've said to myself, why am I driving too much? And it's because in my community in North Minneapolis, I can't get from here to there very easily without getting in my car. I'm an example of what's not working very well. So we need to build neighborhoods that are safe. We need to have transit that's accessible and that provides a wide variety of options. We need to have services in our community that people want. Our neighborhoods need to be safe. And we need to really build dense housing in our communities that support the neighborhoods and provide opportunities for people to live close to their transit opportunities.
Candidate Andrew.
Thank you. I started my company in part because I was haunted by the original 1990 report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that foretold the devastation of global warming. There have now been 4 revisions to that report. A 5th is underway. And with each revision, the picture becomes bleaker and bleaker when we talk about the impacts of climate change. That's why we need to pay close attention to transit as a partial solution to this problem. The number one contributor to greenhouse gases is buildings, over 40%. But number two is transportation. So we have an opportunity. Manufacturing is next. We have an opportunity to do something really, really important, which is why I have been a pioneer on transit in my career. What I want to do as mayor is accelerate the process of developing transit. I want to have not one streetcar line, possibly 2 streetcar lines, and I want to figure out a way to implement them faster. And I do not have the magic solution to that at hand, but we can figure it out. The city's 10-year transportation plan foretells a 20 to 50-year horizon for implementation of up to 14 different streetcar lines that got looked at. And I want to make sure that we can marshal and harness our resources when we have them now and do something that will make a substantial impact. I also want to say something about smart growth. We haven't talked enough about smart growth in this campaign yet. If we employ smart growth strategies which encourage walking and biking, which encourage the reuse of existing buildings instead of knocking them down, which encourage multi-use developments that incorporate shopping, retail, transit, housing, and do it in a way that allows people to traverse shorter distance to get to work, we will have done something really important in tandem with our efforts on transit expansion in our community. So transit is a big part of the solution. We cannot look at transit in isolation. It's got to be looked at in tandem with development and housing and environmental issues.
Candidate Hodges.
Key to my vision for the future of our city is a robust transit and transportation system. It includes light rail, it includes modern streetcars, enhanced bus service, biking, walking, the whole 9 yards. That's center for a couple reasons. First, my goal is to make Minneapolis a city where people can really easily live without a car. That's the kind of city people want to live in, but it also helps meet our goals of sustainability and reduce carbon emissions, which is crucial for the future of our city as well as the future of our planet. But it does that in a couple ways. Things like modern streetcars, things like LRT, hybrid buses actually have fewer emissions, have fewer carbon emissions. But it also allows our development in such a way that we create locational efficiencies. That development happens along those transit corridors in such a way that people are near the things they need. They don't need to travel far to get there. And if they do, they have a streetcar, or they have a train, or they have an enhanced bus, they have a bike. Because when we make permanent investments in infrastructure like rails, people will make permanent investments around them. This is what's happening in cities all across the country. It's great. It's why we want to have it here. Investors prefer rail to tires. And so do riders. So I've never dismissed modern streetcars with the Republican talking points about being cute and touristy and we could do it better other ways. It's absolutely essential to our future. It's a profound economic development tool as well as a transit tool. And it does drive development where development makes the most sense. Around our transit corridors, our commercial corridors, where we want more density. It also allows for horizontal rather than vertical or super concentrated development, which is where a lot of the push-pull between neighborhoods and development happens. We don't necessarily call it smart growth, but I've been talking about it the entire campaign, and it's really crucial to the future. This transit and transportation is at the center of the future of the city.
Candidate Cohen.
Energy is a commodity. It's subject to the laws of supply and demand. Solar operates in a very tough neighborhood, and that's the supply side of the equation, and competes with a lot of other potential sources of energy. But when we go to the demand side of the equation, there we have complete control. There we have no competition. There we can shape strong policies, and that can be done by a mayor. We have heard the optimum answer is transit. It delivers what cannot be delivered by any other source in terms of results in using less fossil fuels. The other aspect of this has been mentioned briefly, and that is the linear equation, which is when you travel great distances, you use more fossil fuels. Suburbs are developed along the lines, horizontal lines, single-family homes, open spaces, low factories and offices. The city is coming to develop increasingly along vertical lines, and where you do that, your distances between work and home are much shorter. I'm on the Planning Commission. Last year, we approved 4,000 apartments in the city of Minneapolis. This used to be a city where people all wanted to have their small single-family homes, but now it has become increasingly acceptable for people to live vertically and understand and accept and want to have these short distances. And of course, the short distances use less fuel. And to again make this point, it is within our total control to do these two things, to do vertical and to do rail. The other problems, the problems that deal with solar, those are problems in which we have much less control, and we are subject to all kinds of economic and outside forces. That doesn't mean we shouldn't concentrate on solar, but it means that we have to recognize that a large part of our solution to the less burning of fossil fuels lies completely within our control, and this should be what policies that we should pursue.
Thank you, Candidate Cohen. Candidate Samuel.
Thank you. The destruction of streetcars and rail transit in the city of Minneapolis is one of the travesties of our urban planning and development. The deception of the auto industry and that whole disaster is part of our shameful history. But now we are reversing that. Today at the City Council, we approved the funding for the streetcars in Nicollet and Central, which is a great achievement. And that is going to precede the streetcars coming to West Broadway and shortly thereafter. We're going to have a network of interconnected multimodal transit options for our region and our city. That's going to include light rail, streetcars, rapid bus, and of course biking and walking options. Just today I met with city staff about improving and widening the bike paths on Plymouth Avenue. Again, closing that green gap and making everything work for us in a sustainable way. I really believe in rail. That's why I'm on pretty much every implementation and planning committee for rail in the city. I'm for the interchange in the North Loop, for the Southwest LRT, the Bottineau LRT, and working with the Metro Transit to get bus rapid transit on Fremont and Emerson and on Penn Avenue, and of course championing streetcars as a solution for the environment, for convenience, and for safety, and for development. I'll give you an example about safety. I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and one of the things the police discovered this year is that one of the easiest, most profitable crimes is snatching iPads, iPods, and phones. And of course, the best place to snatch them is at the bus stop or on the way home from the bus stop. And one of the problems there, especially in communities like North Minneapolis, where you have single-family homes, walking from the bus stop to home, there's not a lot of people around. You can just follow someone and snatch whatever they have.
10 seconds, sir.
Well, when you have light rail and dense housing with great bus sheds that are lit and heated, you can get past those kinds of problems. So it's a multi-faceted solution to multiple problems.
Candidate Winton.
I share the goal of everyone in this room and everyone on this stage for a robust, multimodal, modern transit system that enables our city and our residents in our city to move, to get where they're going, to school and to work and to church and to recreation. That said, there are some big differences in opinion between where I am and where some of my colleagues or opponents on the stage are. And I want to note, I think Councilmember Hodges and Councilmember Samuels are really awesome people. It's been great getting to know both of you on the campaign trail. But we have a very healthy, huge difference of opinion on the streetcars. Today, the City Council voted to take $60 million worth of property tax revenue that otherwise would have gone to pay for police officers, firefighters, road paving for all road users, and divert that money and use it to build a streetcar line. According to the city's own data, and if you shoot me an email at cam@wintonformayor.org, I'd be happy to send you the supporting data points. A streetcar line will cost $40 million per mile. And in contrast, enhancing our existing bus lines will cost $2 million per mile. Councilmember Hodges, Councilmember Samuels, please share with me the seeds to your money tree, or the city's money tree, because I don't have a money tree. I don't think anybody in our city has a tree that's raining dollar bills down. But based on the decision that came today out of City Council, the current leadership of the city must think that we're swimming in riches, that we can go ahead and buy things that are nice to have, but we certainly don't need to have. On the issue of enhanced buses, when I say enhancing our existing bus route, I mean a few key things. One, heating bus stops. Two, enabling people to pay before they get on board the bus. Three, enabling egress and ingress in both doors. Each of those things speeds up the bus process and makes it much more enjoyable. $2 million per mile versus $40 million per mile. To me, the choice is clear. And to the argument that, oh, we have to move quick and get this money while it's available from the federal government, that reminds me of the old story about going to the store and seeing the dog foods for sale. So you buy that dog food. Wow, what a great deal. Just save some money on dog food. And then you get home and you realize you didn't even have a dog in the first place. Now you have to go buy a dog. You certainly don't save money. And the city won't either with this. And I'm out of time.
Next question goes to candidate Andrew first. The Minneapolis Energy Options Campaign is striving to secure a clean, affordable, reliable, and local energy supply by asking the city to explore all of our energy options as our agreements, as has been pointed out, with XL Energy and Centerpoint Energy expire in 2014. Please describe your position on the pending 2013 ballot initiative authorizing the option of energy municipalization. Candidate Andrew.
Thank you. You know, one of the really heartening things about the era we are entering, a renewable energy, clean environment era, is that we see community organizations sprouting up, and they are carrying the flag for sustainability, and MEO is one of those. I am very proud to say I support and have always supported the environmental objectives of Minneapolis energy options. More renewables, better energy conservation, and securing greater community investment on the part of the utility. Those are all goals of Minneapolis energy options. I've supported them, I have lived them, I have put them into practice. I also support the study that was funded by the Minneapolis City Council, $250,000 study to consider this issue. I think that was a very wise thing, and I'll compliment my City Council colleagues for taking that action. We ought to be looking at this. We ought to be studying it. I am concerned about one thing, and that is a strategy of precipitously putting a ballot initiative on the ballot before it's ready to be presented to the public. And so I've asked that we try to work together and secure as much neighborhood support for this as possible. Only a small handful of the neighborhoods in Minneapolis has endorsed putting this ballot initiative on the ballot. We can't do this without grassroots. This has to be grassroots. And 15 or 20 neighborhoods is not grassroots. We have to do that, and we have to have a budget. Every candidate running for mayor knows it's going to take $350,000 at least to run a citywide campaign. We have 4 months until the election. So what I'm hoping we can do is work together and identify a budget and funding sources, because if we do, we will move forward very quickly and make a passionate attempt to pass this ballot initiative. But we better remember what happened in Wisconsin with Scott Walker, the governor, and they brought a ballot initiative to the people of Wisconsin before its time, and it has been right-wing hegemony ever since. So we need to be prepared. If the city council votes for this, I will support it and work for it.
Candidate Hodges.
Of the things I'm proud of about this campaign, one of them is that I prepared for this forum using sunlight and candlelight, since I still don't have power in my home. Another is that I'm the only candidate who's endorsed by the Sierra Club. And the other is that I was the first candidate to support Minneapolis Energy Options. I don't, not just the objectives, but actually MEO. I support it, and I've done it from the beginning, and I've only had one position. It speaks to our energy future and our energy vision. I don't actually know if I support doing a public utility. Like Boulder has done, we're going to need to ask the question if doing a public utility versus other option is going to be more or less reliable or the same, more or less expensive or the same, and will it help us meet our renewable energy goals better, worse, or the same? But if we do move forward with Excel, but I should be clear, but I support asking that question, because if we do move forward with Excel Energy, knowing we have multiple options is important as we work to have the strongest negotiating position possible with Excel. With due respect to my opponents who do have Excel as a client, Excel is not a client of mine. So I feel free to use every tool possible to push them as hard as possible. Because if we do another franchise agreement with them, we're going to have to push for a shorter agreement. 20 years is way too long in this environment of renewable energy. We have to push for higher renewable energy standards to get to our 10% local renewables. And we're going to need to make those standards about and beyond the level the state has set. We are going to need to push them and push them hard, and we need every tool in the toolbox we have to do that. As mayor, that is what I will do. As council member, that's what I'm doing right now. For the strongest possible renewable future, I support MEO.
Candidate Cohen.
In a word, no. I know this may not be popular with some people in the crowd, but I want you to consider this. If we end up buying this utility, not only will it cost billions and billions of dollars, and we have to pay interest on the muni bonds that we'd have to sell in order to buy it, and you'd be paying that interest as part of your property taxes. It's going to crowd out every other initiative that we want to have in this city in terms of roads, bridges, everything. It would freeze any other capital investment for years and years and years. We shouldn't be doing it for that reason, and there are a couple other reasons too. We don't have we're politicians. We don't have the expertise to have the oversight on a public utility here. We'd end up hiring the same people that we just fired when we got rid of the franchise. And finally, just consider this. A muni is a magnet for political appointees. There's Joe out there in the audience. He put up 50-yard signs, and there's Council Member Smith over here on this side, and the mayor is sitting in his office, and he says he's got this great business initiative and he wants to get it passed. Council Member Smith says, yeah, but Joe needs a job. He put up 60-yard signs. And the next thing you know, Joe is a public relations specialist over at the Muni. He put up 50-yard signs. 25-yard signs get you a broom. No, it isn't going to work. There are better ways to do it.
Candidate Samuels.
Thank you, and I certainly applaud and thank the folks in the audience who have brought this issue to the fore. I think these are things we have to ask. These are questions we have to ask. Are we doing everything as economically efficiently as we can, and are we being good stewards of the taxpayers' money? I supported the city's initiative to look into this, and because I do have some concerns, and I think those concerns need to be answered too. Concerns on both sides. And so for instance, Boulder has been studying this for a while. They're ahead of us. They're only a quarter of our population, but their study has to date cost $3 million. And so far their projections are that this could be a $3 billion cost of transferring the service. And so these are the kind of things we have to find out. We're of course a much larger city, and so one of those are multiplied to scale, and what costs are constant. And we're going to be learning a lot from our other city who is preceding us, and I'm very interested to make sure that we are moving forward in a pragmatic and not in just a philosophically idealistic way, but that everything is being done based on spending tax dollars well and looking out for the environment that we all will share into the future. And I don't think we can just write a blank check on this thing, and we owe that. So I can't make a commitment to anything that I don't know the answer to. That is in essence a blank check. But one commitment I can make is that we will look at it and give it a fair examination.
Candidate Winton.
So I think folks are aware that at the end of 2014, we have a set of choices to make, and then we have a longer-term set of choices to make. At the end of 2014, by the end of 2014, we have to decide whether we're going to re-up with Xcel for our electricity service in the city and re-up with CenterPoint for our natural gas service in the city. For both of those, I support re-upping. The longest contract that Xcel has ever given me, though, is 5 years. When I am marketing and negotiating wind turbine maintenance services with Xcel, I'm never able to get a 20-year contract. So when I'm mayor, I'm certainly not going to give them a 20-year contract. I think 5 years is a fair maximum, but it'll be a negotiation. Once we re-up with each of those providers, and let me be clear, the reason we need to re-up with each of those at the end of 2014 is because between now and the end of 2014, there's simply not enough time to municipalize either the natural gas or the electrical utility and roll out management of each of those utilities. But once we've re-upped under a much shorter contract than the existing 20-year contracts, I absolutely support continuing to research our options. I support looking at what Boulder and other cities have done. And I support crunching the numbers to see what we can do and at what cost. We do need to be candid, though, all of us who care about renewably generated electricity. We all need to be candid about the fact, though, that if we're going to increase the percentage of power in our city that is generated by renewable sources, the price is going to go up. And I'm fine with that. I've made choices in my life that demonstrate I'm fine with that. But we cannot, we being those of us who care about that value, that topic, we can't go out into the city and say that we're going to increase the percentage of renewables and bring down the cost. Because all of us lose credibility when we do that. And not to belabor the point, but that's what stuck in my craw so much about the press conference that one of my opponents had recently with the solar plan. When the numbers were off by, he said the prices were 1/3 of what they actually would be. It decreases the credibility that all of us have as we work so hard to promote this important value of increasing renewably generated electricity. So let's not make that mistake as we look at our options for electricity. Electricity in the city.
Candidate Cherryhomes.
Well, I believe that Minneapolis must chart its own energy future. Minneapolis' current franchise agreements with Xcel Energy and CenterPoint have allowed for $450 million in annual revenue to both companies, and those agreements have only brought $22 million in franchise fees to the city. And whatever choice we make, whether it be to re-up or to have our own municipal energy system, whatever choice we make, we must do better than we have done. That's how I believe. I'm open to studying the municipalization of energy, and I support the study that the City Council has asked for. I think that's a good move. I think that's a prudent move. But frankly, I will tell you quite honestly, I have a little bit of a nervousness at the city taking over something as major as an energy company. I'm not at all sure that that's something the city of Minneapolis is set up to do, and I have to be honest about that. But I am open to what the study reveals, and I think we should wait and see what the study reveals, and then we need to work with the business community, with the city council, and with the residents of the city to choose the option that is best for our city. At the end of the day, we have to do what's best for our residents and what's best for our city. That's what we're charged with doing. And at this point, we don't know what that is. I want to wait and see what the study reveals and what the study informs us. I think that it was a prudent action to make that study, and I think it's precipitous to take any other action until we've seen what that study reveals.
Thank you, candidate Cherryhomes. This next question goes, first of all, to candidate Hodges. What is your position on a zero waste program, and does it include a position on the HERC, the head of an energy recovery center?
I have made a zero waste city a key part of my environmental platform, and we need to apply ourselves rigorously to get there. And like MEO, I have only had one position on increasing burning at the HERC, and that is a resounding no. Because when we are zero waste, there will be nothing left to burn. Working toward this goal, a zero waste goal, is a better route than increasing the poisons that we send out across North and Northeast Minneapolis. I have a lot of experience working on zero waste initiatives. I initiated the city's organics recycling program, pilot program. I made sure that events in the city of Minneapolis are required to recycle. It seems strange that they weren't, but they weren't. And I just worked and was just part of the team that put together a single sort recycling project. Just got my bin a couple weeks ago, and I'm still getting used to not having to sort, but it's fantastic. Zero waste would include organics citywide when it makes sense, being able to recycle the last plastics that we don't recycle already, working with businesses to do a plastic bag ban, and working at the state and federal level to enact legislation that would require reduction of packaging wherever possible. Because when we are zero waste, really, there is nothing left to burn. Right now, over half of what is burned in the county facility consists of office paper, cardboard, newspaper, food waste. The Climate Change Advisory Group called on the state to recycle and compost 75% of our waste by 2025 to make a substantive impact on climate change. This is an achievable goal if we focus on recycling and food waste composting collection rather than expanding our burning. Incineration is an inefficient way to produce energy, and it creates minimal economic activity compared to recycling, compared to zero waste. So our future is about zero waste and heading toward it in every way possible. It is not about burning more at a garbage burner and sending more poisons out across communities that already have enough.
Candidate Cohen.
I'm going to have to say that I'm not terribly well schooled on this particular question, but my understanding is that the dispute revolves around whether or not we should increase the amount of burning that we do at the garbage facility. And the argument is that there are too many emissions as it is now, and we shouldn't do it, and we should find different ways to dispose of it. My concern is this. If this is the question, again, I think this may be a little over my head. I think we're meeting all the federal requirements, all the state requirements so far as emissions are concerned. I think that's the standard that we should use. And as for not burning at all, it all ends up then in land waste, in a landfill somewhere. That's fine for political candidates in the city of Minneapolis because we don't have to deal with the landfill. But if you stick everything in a landfill, you're going to have groundwater problems, you're going to have another set of problems. So I think this involves some kind of a balance. And it's my understanding that we have struck this balance pretty much now, and there's a request for some increase of some kind, and the increase falls within the the parameters of the federal and state regulatory regulations, and I guess I'd say my position is I support it.
Thank you, Candidate Cohen. Candidate Samuels.
Thank you. Certainly I believe in zero waste is a great goal that I think is coming increasingly achievable. I was also proudly on the council when we passed a single sort system, and now I can just throw everything in one container, and my whole family now recycles instead of just me. I was the guy who was retrieving everything and sorting it, and every family has one. And so it's a great deal, and now there's going to be less waste going to the HERC. When you see those plumes go up in the air, they're affecting people in the near vicinity and to a lesser degree people further away, and of course everybody downwind. But other advocates have worked really hard to reduce the emissions at the HERC to the absolute state-of-the-art minimum, and we thank them for that and are grateful that we have as clean a burning facility, but we can do better. One of the things that I discovered is that the suburbs are responsible for 2/3 of the waste that come into the HERC. So no matter how zero we get in our waste production, if the suburbs are producing, then it doesn't do the HERC any good. And so we're going to have to make sure that Hennepin County is taking up this zero waste mantra and making that a goal for the entire county and the region, so that when we reduce our waste, they reduce their waste, and the HERC burns less just by the lesser demand. And I think that's an achievable goal. As mayor, I'm going to work hard to make sure that work hard with the county to make sure that everybody pulls their weight on this, because as the fumes go global, so does the garbage come global to us. And we're going to have to stop that pattern.
Candidate Winton.
I too share the goal of zero waste as an aspiration that we can always be striving for. I didn't come up with the 5 R's framework. I think we're all familiar with the 3 R's framework: reduce, reuse, recycle. Added to those are rethink at the front end and rot at the back end. I saw it online. If anybody here was the one that came up with that, my thanks. I thought it was a convenient way to think about it. Rethink is, do we need this thing in the first place? Does our society need to be engaged in making it? And maybe not. And at the back end, the rot part, composting, is going to be the norm, I think, whereas for me it's something I've just gotten used to recently. But through those methods we can keep striving for zero waste. Let's talk about HERC though. I absolutely oppose expanding garbage burning at HERC. I've read the studies. Covanta, and again, I think it's worth repeating that one of my opponents chose not to disclose in the first debate that she had been within the paid employ of Covanta a month previously, and it took the Star Tribune ferreting that out. So I ask you all, think about the interests that folks have, and I've been very candid about mine. Covanta engaged a consulting company to do a study of what poisons would be generated from those smokestacks that would go into the lungs of people living on the north side of the city. And I read the study, and it talked a lot about how, oh sure, there would be an increase in pollution, but don't worry, it's within acceptable limits. It's within acceptable limits. And I thought about what I'd feel like if somebody came to my doorstep, knocked on my door and said, sir, your 2.5-year-old daughter and your 10-month-old son are going to need to ingest some dioxins and some additional liver toxins and ingest some nitrous oxide, but don't worry, sir, it's all within acceptable limits. Hell no. Get off my doorstep. Not going to happen. And so I'm not sure, given that that would be my reaction as a father, how I, in good faith, could ask someone on the north side to do the same. I won't. And yes, the alternative is a landfill. But anyone who hasn't done their homework on landfills might not know that the cutting edge of landfills is a lot different than it was 30 years ago. We trap it at the bottom. We cover it at the top. We use an electric or a natural gas-powered vehicle to get the trash there in the first place. We capture the methane that's generated. Is it perfect? No, none of these solutions are perfect, but a modern landfill is a whole lot better than a poison-generating machine that affects our least advantaged citizens.
Candidate Cherryhomes.
Well, as candidate Winton has made clear, I am the person who has had a contractual relationship with Covanta, which I no longer have. That being said, I am in favor of a zero waste program, but Minneapolis needs to make many changes in order to get to be a zero waste community. In one of my other relationships with Minneapolis Refuse Inc., who are the guys who pick up some of your garbage, I was one of the pioneers with them in figuring out how we were going to do a single sort program in Minneapolis. The fact of the matter is we designed a single sort program as a way to deal with the unwieldy and ineffective way of picking up garbage in Minneapolis, and in going to the city leadership got no traction on that at all for the pilot program, and we ended up going over to Hennepin County, who was very interested in funding the pilot program. They did fund the pilot program. They found it worked. They found that there were unprecedented amounts of recycling that were happening in communities that they had not anticipated that would happen in, and now we have a single sort recycling system throughout the whole city of Minneapolis. I think we need to expand on that. And now what we needed to do is go back maybe to those folks that make those carts and say, yeah, let's make some compost carts and give folks compost carts in return for them taking a smaller, if you will, garbage cart or recycling cart, so that we get people into composting. And I think that that's important. I would love to think that we're going to get to a time where we have zero waste and where everything is used in some way. But the fact of the matter is, and I said this before at another forum, we all have things that we don't know what to do with, that we can't get rid of. Most of us in this room have probably been parents, and we've had one of those bicycle things, those plastic bicycle things that your kids ride around in. Those are really, really, really difficult to get rid of, and they end up in landfills. I think that it is preferable to burning things than to putting them in landfills. And I agree with Mr. Cohen that one of the reasons we in the city don't feel the burden of a landfill is because we don't have any idea what it is to live next to one. And so it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. So I think it is preferable to burning some of those things. I would love to get to a point where we have nothing that we have to burn. Everything is recycled, but we're not to that point yet. We have a lot of work to do.
Candidate Andrew.
Thank you. I'm against the expansion for two reasons at the waste to energy facility. For two reasons. The community continues to raise concerns about the impacts of the facility, and now that we are in a track of getting analysis at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, I believe it's fair and valid to honor those community concerns pending the outcome of those studies. The second reason I oppose the expansion is because we are talking about a zero waste future for our community. We need to acknowledge that we are a long way from being a zero energy city. There are no zero waste cities anywhere in the world. But I am an apostle of Will McDonough, the prophet who has spoken for the last 25 years about cradle-to-cradle management of resources. And that with garbage, we are managing resources, we are not managing waste. But to do this is going to require a tremendous amount of going upstream and a huge amount of collaboration. I did a report for the city via the Blue-Green Alliance that proposed that we start working between cities to develop programs, between Minneapolis and St. Paul, to develop a program to buy items and commodities at both cities on a joint purchasing program that were environmentally benign as a way to start us on that track. If we're going to be a truly zero waste community, it's going to require collaboration, it's going to require big thinking, and it's going to require action. And I have to say, to maybe a gentle prod to my friends on the city council, these are people who have done nothing on this issue while they have been in office. The city's recycling program has gone backwards. Minneapolis has the lowest recycling rate in Hennepin County of all the cities. We don't have it. There are 12 cities with composting in the county. We're years away from having that in Minneapolis. We need to be proactive. We need to take action, and we need to start moving to a zero-waste economy.
Thank you. It is my prerogative to ask a question that is not on your list of prepared questions, and I'm going to do so now. It's propitious that it falls to candidate Cohen to answer the question that is not prepared.
Just my luck.
It is. Everyone else will have a few minutes. If you talk quickly, no one else will have a chance to think of anything to say. So, here's the question. Energy inefficient housing stock waste energy. What would you do, and exactly how would you do it, to plug the leaks and create energy efficiencies in Minneapolis's aging housing stock?
Well, thanks a lot for that one, Don. I think that we need to deal with the problem which you have laid out, which is legitimate, by assessing on a home-to-home, block-to-block, neighborhood-to-neighborhood basis, specifically what needs to be done, and either by ordinance or by supplementary programs or by whatever is necessary, do what has to be done to, in fact, plug these holes and make these houses energy efficient. We can't continue to go along and say that we are an energy conscious, solar conscious community unless we address our own problems diligently and vigorously. So what can a mayor do? A mayor can propose the necessary legislation to get this done. In some cases, you're going to have people that can't afford it, and you've got to supplement it in some way. In some cases, you'll have people that can afford it and don't want to do it, and you're going to have to be sure that they do it. And then we will achieve the goal that I think that, and I commend candidate Andrews for this, of having the greenest, the best city in the country in dealing with energy problems.
Thank you, candidate Cohen. Candidate Samuels.
Well, this is a great challenging question because there are always costs attached to these kinds of things, and I'm just going to be driving your taxes up if the more costs I talk about. So I'm going to try to be very careful. But I think mayor can do things. I talked to you about the 100 green homes and the possibility of getting our Habitat and other nonprofit builders to move in that direction. But they're also rehabbing homes. And I think that that's an opportunity when there's a rehab project that is being funded by the city for us to set standards that are green and that qualify at the highest levels of efficiency. Also, I believe that as I hinted at before, one of the biggest areas of challenge for this is investment property. Homeowners who pay their own utilities and who can control that by how much they invest in insulation are incentivized to insulate their homes because it all comes out through the roofs and the walls. But if an investor wants to spend $30,000 buying a foreclosed home, the kind of money that it takes to do that is not much, and someone without the resources to invest in insulation can buy a home and don't add anything to it. Don't add much, just get it on the market, and then the renter freezes or pays the astronomical bill. So we have to find ways to hold investors accountable to levels of efficiency as part of the code and the building code for them to meet before they can get that rental license. And I think that we can find ways to measure that so that vulnerable people do not end up paying astronomical amounts for their heating and cooling.
Candidate Winton.
I'm the only candidate on the stage not coming from a background in government. I applaud and honor the service of my opponents, and for heck's sake, I'm trying to get into government. So I look forward to serving in government as your mayor, if you give me that honor. But that said, since I'm not coming from government, since instead I'm coming from the renewable energy business, I'm bringing a different set of experiences to this. And so I see a solution that nobody else has mentioned yet. And it's engaging the private sector to front the money for the improvements necessary to make our older housing stock more energy efficient, and then letting the private sector share in some of the benefits that flow from the cost savings. Folks may know that Honeywell, homegrown, Minnesota-founded Honeywell, and a lot of other companies too, do this type of work across the country and around the world. They front the money for the improvements necessary, and then they get a cut of the savings. In Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, of course the mayor now, has created the Chicago Infrastructure Trust to do exactly that. And so it's very difficult to go to Honeywell and say, Honeywell, fix 4882 France Avenue. But it's a lot easier to go to Honeywell and say, Honeywell, I, as mayor of Minneapolis, want you to front the money for energy efficiency improvements on 1,000 Minneapolis houses. And we'll have homeowners, residents, sign up to be part of that project. The mayor has a remarkable platform to make things happen at scale. And so as mayor, I'll make sure that the private sector is engaged at scale to front the money for this sort of thing, sharing the benefits, so that we don't have to hit anybody with the stick of an ordinance, we don't have to raise anybody's taxes to do it, and we can still achieve the goal of more energy efficient housing stock.
Candidate Cherryhomes.
I'm not in favor of ordinances and rules making people doing things. I'm not sure that that is always the best way to do it. But I do think that we have to have standards for rehab. We have to have standards that promote green rehab and make our homes energy efficient as we rehab them. And in the neighborhood that I live in, that's a very real thing. I live with old homes all around me, and the question is, as Councilmember Samuel so well put it, are the people that are rehabbing these homes doing them to an energy efficient standard, or are they just sort of doing the little, buff and puff and moving some people in? We need to make sure that they are rehabbing them to a standard and an energy efficient standard that then doesn't saddle the person who's renting there or who buys that home with exorbitant energy costs. We also need to have financial incentives. The reality is there are a lot of people who can't afford to make energy improvements to their homes, and we need to have financial incentives for them. Years ago, we had what was called the This Old House program, where if you renovated your house, your property taxes stayed at a certain level to compensate for the fact that you had put money into your house and you had done work on your house. I think we need to think about financial incentives and tax incentives so that people can afford to make these repairs. The other thing that I think we need to do, too, while I'm not in favor of demolishing properties, I'm a rehabber and I believe in rehabbing old homes, I think we need to change our public policy so that we aren't demolishing property, but rather we're deconstructing properties when we do have to take them down. Minneapolis is far, far, far behind cities all around the country in establishing a public policy around deconstruction as opposed to demolition. Deconstruction is a green job for the people that are deconstructing that house. It's providing work for them, and it's a green way of dealing with some of the vacant properties that we have in our neighborhoods that are not suitable to be rehabbed.
Candidate Andrew.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we need to do, again, everybody's kind of looking at the financing opportunities. If we look at the most effective thing we can do to mitigate the impact of global climate change, it's making buildings more energy efficient. And serendipitously, it's also, in many cases, the cheapest thing we can do. Making our homes more energy efficient is sometimes really inexpensive and doesn't require any major financing. It's about caulking, it's about window sealing, it's about controls, it's about doing simple things. It's about energy efficient lighting. And a big impact can be made in those dwellings without any financing. That requires public education, and believe it or not, I know everybody here is an expert in one area of energy or another, but out there in the community, a lot of people need public education. It's partly why my company exists. So we need to do the public education. The financing piece of it ought to come from a combination of sources. Using, as Cam has described, the so-called energy service companies like Honeywell or Johnson Controls or other big companies who come in and do these energy efficiency programs is sometimes really expensive. And actually, Cam, sometimes it's better for the government to do it because they can get cheaper money and they can do it more effectively. But both private sector and public sector solutions on financing ought to be on the table. Next, the regulatory environment needs to be properly managed, and a mayor is in a wonderful position to work collaboratively with other taxing jurisdictions and the legislature to approach the regulators to get regulatory programs effected with organizations like utilities that make it more economically worthwhile for those families to do that kind of rehabilitating.
10 seconds.
Finally, tax-favored status. I'm a big believer in rewarding good behavior. The legislature ought to step up. The city ought to lead the charge to get legislation passed that will make doing this on a broad scale, a large scale, easy and cost-effective.
Candidate Hodges.
Well, I like this question because the answer to it is great for the city and the people who live in the city. Because when we talk about these initiatives to retrofit already existing homes, in particular, already existing buildings, we're often talking about the commercial buildings. That's, for example, PACE can be used for commercial buildings. And we know that of the commercial buildings, 70% of the emissions come from the Class A buildings, the skyscrapers downtown. And so they've gotten a lot of focus. I've worked with Senator Franken's office on his Back to Work Minnesota initiative, talking and working with those downtown businesses. And that's good for the business climate when they create efficiencies. But the great thing about this question is that this creates money in the pocketbook of the people who live in Minneapolis. This makes a difference to the bottom line of people who live in our housing. And so I think there's a few things that we can do to help make this happen more, to help get more efficiency out of our housing stock. I was on my neighborhood organization for 4 years. I was chair for 2 of them. One of the best programs that we had through NRP was a revolving home loan fund. And we would loan money to folks who were doing projects on their home, often ones that were about creating more efficiencies in their home. If we scaled that up, let's say we were in the midst of renegotiating franchise agreements with utilities like Xcel and CenterPoint, we might want to consider asking them, as part of our franchise agreement, to put some money into a revolving home loan fund program that we could manage at the city. We could scale it up, we could scale it down, we could think about how to do that. But it would create a resource for folks who could then use it to create more efficiencies in their home and work with the utilities to figure out what the best ones would be for each individual homeowner. There is indeed a role that our regulatory function can play here, that as we, the city has properties ourselves, and we can and we do require efficiency in the city in the properties that we own ourselves, and we can, increase that, but also have requirements for folks who are building new in particular, but also remodeling and rehabbing, to have that expectation, because our housing stock is a valuable asset to the entire city as well as an asset to the person living in the home. And we learned that through our mitigation for the airport issue. When we finally won that lawsuit and the airports were forced to do the mitigation on those homes, we found out that our housing stock is an asset in total as well as individually. So there's a whole lot of options there, but all of them speak to the bottom line of our pocketbooks, which is fabulous and important.
Thank you very much, candidates. And now I'd like to give you 2 minutes each, starting with candidate Samuels, to convince this room that you would be the best candidate for mayor on the issue of energy efficiency, climate change, and the subjects that we have dealt with here today in these questions. Begin with you.
Well, I'm the candidate who best understands the interconnectedness between all of the issues that we're concerned about, especially the communities that are left behind. Again, there is a green gap, and I am the person who is going to be most effective in using the tools that we have discussed today, whether it be transit, whether it be greening of homes, whether it be green gardens. We're going to be able to use those tools to close that green gap for myself and my neighbors and for the entire city, and bring a kind of green justice to our city so that nobody is left behind in this. And I tell you, there are a lot of great things that have happened in our city and our world. And in fact, we have one of the greatest cities with the greatest gaps. And the greatest tragedy would be if we become the greenest city with the greatest gap. And so now, who is going to be the person with the heart and the mind and the determination to make sure that the city greens together, that people get jobs, that children learn about these issues and become included in our community and become wage-earning, professional, fully employed people who are going to join us in all of our ecology efforts. I'm that candidate, and I promise you that I will bring the whole city together, working with the county, working with the state and the federal government to make sure that we are all partners on every level, collaborating, caring about those who need the help the most, and understand that there are people out there who can't afford to make some of the changes that we are making, like buying my Prius. A lot of people can't buy a Prius. They buy an old clunker.
10
gets
seconds.
12 gallons a mile, 12 miles a gallon. So these things have to be thought about. Who's going to be the candidate that brings these things to the table? I will.
Candidate Winton, why should the people of Minneapolis vote for you for mayor?
In Minnesota, if you've ever been out to the Buffalo Ridge in southwest Minnesota, it's one of the most beautiful sights you could ever imagine. Stretching into the distance, it's wind turbines as far as the eye can see. And then all along the southern tier of Minnesota, there are more and more wind turbines going up all the time. And a lot of the companies that own those wind turbines, whether it's Yes Excel Energy or down to Minwind, if you're not aware of the story of Minwind, look them up out in Luverne, Minnesota. Those companies trust me and my colleagues to make their wind turbines work. Right now, I mean, this very moment, as we sit here in this auditorium, those turbines are spinning. And a year ago, they were spinning. And 10 years from now, they'll be spinning. Because my colleagues and I get the job done. It's very easy to sit and talk about goals and things we want to achieve. It's a lot harder to lead an enterprise where people actually go out in the real world, make it work, reduce carbon output, and do it in a way where the numbers work. And that's what I've done. I want to apply that mindset to leading City Hall, leading our city government, yes, on energy efficiency, and yes, on energy, and on transit, and across the whole range of functions that City Hall leads on, in providing basic services, in making sure that businesses can start here and grow here, in making sure that our school system is world class. And I know the purpose of this debate today is to talk specifically about the green issues, but we have to remember that they exist interconnected with all the rest of those issues. And so I encourage you to learn more about me. WintonForMayor.org is a shameless plug for my website, and I hope you check that out. But to return to the topic of green energy and transit, just to recap some of the things I talked about here today. I absolutely support continuing to look at our options as we go forward in the renegotiation with Excel and Centerpoint. I support energy efficiency improvements in a way where we don't have to tax people out of their homes.
10 seconds.
and I support a robust multimodal transit system that we can afford, which is enhanced buses and not a $40 million per mile streetcar line. Thanks for your interest tonight, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Candidate Cherryhomes.
Thank you. A green city is a city that is safe, where people have housing that's affordable to them, and they can afford it because they're not paying exorbitant energy costs. A green city is a city that has transit that reaches everybody and serves everybody. A green city is a city that has robust communities that have the services that they need in them. I am the candidate in this race that knows how to build those communities. I have done it. I've created jobs, I've built housing, I've put together communities, I have done smart growth, and I can take you to the places that I've done it throughout the city of Minneapolis, and I'm proud of what I've done. One of the things that I am really troubled by when we talk about green opportunities is the lack of green awareness, the lack of conversation about that with communities that are lower income or that don't have as many opportunities. And that really does come down to issues of communication. And Minneapolis has done a really not very exemplary job about communication, and I'm going to change that. I'm going to make sure that we have an office with the Director of Environmental Affairs. I'm going to make sure that there's a place on our website that is solely dedicated to initiatives that folks can take to make their homes and their properties and their neighborhoods greener. I'm going to look to having better methods of communicating with people, because if people don't know, they can't go do it. And we need to make sure that everybody in our city is engaged in this conversation, that everybody knows what they can do, and I'm the person who can do that. I've worked throughout more neighborhoods in this city than anybody else up here. I've lived throughout this city. I can bridge the gaps that exist in our community, and I can talk to all of the different communities within our city about why this is important. It is important to the lifeblood of our city. It is important to our future. We have to be a green city. We have to be a sustainable city. We have to be a city with sustainable neighborhoods and opportunities for people. I'm also the only candidate in this race that has actually created green jobs. With Summit Academy and the Network for Better Futures, I know how to hire people. I know how to create jobs. I am the better candidate because I have the experience in creating the green jobs and the smart growth experience.
Candidate Andrew.
Thank you very much. And thank you to my colleagues who are sitting up here with me tonight, and thank you to Mr. Shelby, who is a standard bearer for responsible environmentalism. I could probably, if I wanted to make the case, I could probably make the case that I am the most progressive politician sitting at this table. If you look at the record, So that's an important thing when we talk about being thoughtful and progressive on the environment, but it's not the most important thing. All of the DFLers up here are progressive. But the most important thing when you think about a mayor is you have to think about the person who is most capable of building the bridges, of working collaboratively, of being a unifier and building the case, working with the business community, working with the utility, working with the neighborhoods where I grew up and got my fingernails dirty as a community activist, working with families, working with different government jurisdictions. That is what being mayor is all about. It's the most important thing in the job. It's also really important to have a mayor who is proactive, not reactive. I have a demonstrated history of always being proactive. Indeed, I'm the only candidate up here who's actually proposed an environmental initiative in this campaign, incredibly. And I'm a proactive guy. I build things to scale. I do them big. I am not a marquee come lately on the environment. I've been doing this stuff a long time. I know how to get it done. My #1 campaign platform is make Minneapolis the greenest city in America. You know I will. You know I will do that if I'm elected mayor because it's in my DNA. It's in my genes. I love this issue because it creates prosperity. It cleans up our communities. It engages people. It's one of the most fundamentally important things we can do as public servants is go out and beat the bushes and convince our friends and neighbors and the regulators and the government and the business community that this is what we have to do. It is the future of our city. Thank you.
Candidate Hodges.
Thank you. Well, we are at a crossroads, Minneapolis. As we grow and develop our fantastic city into the future, we really have to decide if we're going to move forward into the 21st century building a city by doing what cities do: transit, recycling, the public good. Or are we going to go back to the false choices of the 90s where we thought we had to burn garbage or give large businesses subsidies to make sure that they would come here and stay here? And that is true in the conversation that we are having today. Our energy future does not need to be controlled by large and powerful utilities. We must negotiate, we must work from a position of strength, the strongest possible position for our renewable future as we move forward together doing that. It's why I support MEO, and it's been a large part of the conversation we've been having here tonight. But we also need to make sure that we are moving forward for everyone, every neighborhood, every person, without exception, because we have to make sure our energy and our environmental future is for everyone, every neighborhood, every person, no exception, and that it is healthy for everyone. So I'm proud to have the Sierra Club endorsement. I'm the only candidate here with the Sierra Club endorsement because of those values and principles. I am proud of the work that I've done at the city on transit, on making a zero-waste city, on the energy investments we've been doing, and the investments in our public buildings that we are doing already. I am proud of the leadership that I am showing here by saying no more burning at the HERC and yes to MEO, and that has been my position the entire time. And I am proud of the platform positions you can all read about at betsyhodges.org, about the actual proposals and platform proposals I have. You can read about them in depth there. Because it's going to be important. The mayor has to have these values and this set of principles at the center of her leadership. That is what I offer you. It's what I've been doing, and it is what I will do, and I ask for your support for mayor.
Candidate Cohen.
Tough question. 3 greatest jobs in America are mayor of your city, governor of your state, president of your country. They're the only ones where the minute you step into office, you're in a position to be in control, to make a difference, to do the job. You're not just part of a party, you're not climbing up the legislative ladder, you're not waiting for somebody to kick off. You're there, it's your job. And of the 3 of them, the best one is mayor, because you're out amongst them every day. They see you, you see them. They judge you, you judge them. The ones that voted for you, the ones that voted against you. They're pushing, you're pushing. It's the greatest thing there is. I don't know if I'm any better than anybody else at this table. I'm impressed by all of them. It's an honor to be here. I'm proud of all of you for coming out of here. Half of you don't even have your electricity yet. I just got mine 2 hours ago. I mean, this is a big deal that you would come out here and listen to us talk. I'm just glad to be a part of it. I know I could do the job. It's a great job. It's a great challenge. I've got a lot of background in city government. I've held a lot of different jobs. They'll have to carry me out of City Hall feet first. I just love it down there, and I love this part of it. And I just want to say there isn't anyone at this table, not anyone at this table that wouldn't make an outstanding mayor of the city of Minneapolis. Someday, but not yet.
Round of applause for the candidates for mayor from Minneapolis. Conversation will continue. If you wish to join us at, is it the lowbrow or highbrow? Lowbrow. Lowbrow. just down Nicollet a little bit, 43rd, 44th, 42nd, close. I don't hang out at the lowbrow places. Our thanks to the candidates, our thanks to all of the sponsors who put this together. Thank you all for attending. This is, well, the most important subject that we can be discussing in this part of our history in this country, in this planet. And so I wish that we were doing this at Northrop and the place was filled. But it will be 5 years, 10 years from now, when it may be too late to do anything at all. So the candidate that you vote for mayor has to start yesterday. Thank you very much for being a part of this tonight. Go vote.